The message was simple. A single line of text, devoid of embellishment or ambiguity, broadcast across the known universe in every language and format. "We are coming for you." It appeared on alien starships, government networks, personal devices, and even etched into the surfaces of distant moons. For those who received it, the meaning was clear, and the message sparked both confusion and fear. The humans, a species long dismissed as insignificant on the galactic stage, had issued a warning unlike any before. It wasn't the first time humanity had made contact with alien civilizations, but it was certainly the first time they had responded this way. For centuries, humans had watched from the shadows of their own solar system, learning, adapting, and growing. The Galactic Coalition, a vast network of advanced civilizations spanning thousands of star systems, had always viewed Earth as a backwater world, its people too primitive to matter. While the Coalition's members warred, traded, and thrived, humanity was left to fend for itself, ignored and underestimated. At least, that's what the Coalition had believed. But humans had not been idle. While the Coalition turned their eyes outward, humanity turned inward, uniting in ways the galaxy could hardly imagine. They shed the divisions of old and poured their collective strength into technological and societal advancement, all while keeping their growing capabilities carefully hidden. And when the time came, when the universe overstepped its bounds and reached for what was not theirs, humanity responded. It began with a single incident, seemingly minor in the grand scope of the galaxy. A Coalition mining fleet, searching for resources, entered a solar system marked as unclaimed on their charts. It was a routine mission, another unremarkable operation in a sector filled with stars and planets that nobody cared about. But the system wasn't unclaimed. It belonged to Earth. The mining fleet ignored the warning beacons stationed on its outskirts, dismissing them as relics of some primitive species. They set up operations, stripping the planets and moons of their resources, unaware of the silent eyes watching their every move. The humans waited. They didn't send ambassadors or plead with the Coalition. Instead, they observed, recorded, and prepared. When the time was right, they acted. In one night, the mining fleet disappeared. No distress signals, no survivors, nothing left to explain what had happened, only the ominous void where the fleet had once been. The Coalition, perplexed, sent investigators. They too vanished without a trace. Rumors began to spread among the stars, whispers of a force lurking in the shadows, one that didn't bargain or negotiate. And then the message came. The reactions across the galaxy were mixed. Some species dismissed it as a bluff, a hollow threat from an insignificant race. Others, more cautious, began pulling back their operations near human space. But even the most skeptical civilizations couldn't ignore the growing reports of ships disappearing near Earth's borders, of scouts who ventured too close only to be swallowed by the dark. The Coalition convened emergency meetings, debates raging over how to respond to this sudden defiance from a species they had once deemed beneath notice. On Earth, there was no debate. Humanity was united as never before, driven by a singular purpose, to ensure that no one would ever take from them again. They had suffered too long in silence, watching as the galaxy thrived while they struggled. Now, they were no longer content to sit in the shadows. The universe would recognize humanity, not as victims, not as bystanders, but as equals, or as conquerors. The fleet humanity had built was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Ships forged from advanced alloys, armed with weapons powered by the very forces that held the universe together. Each vessel carried the will of billions, a testament to what humanity could achieve when pushed to the brink. The Coalition, for all its technological superiority, was unprepared for a species that thrived on adversity, one that had clawed its way up from the dirt to the stars. As the first wave of human ships prepared to leave Earth's orbit, the mood was electric. On every screen, in every corner of the planet, people gathered to watch. The leaders of Earth spoke, their words resolute and unyielding. They didn't call for revenge or domination, but for justice, for a reckoning that was long overdue. And while the galaxy debated, humans moved. The Coalition's outer colonies were the first to fall. The humans didn't target civilians or infrastructure, but the military outposts, the ships, and the stations that represented the Coalition's reach. They struck with precision, dismantling entire fleets before anyone could comprehend what was happening. Words spread like wildfire, tales of human ships appearing from nowhere, their weapons tearing through even the most advanced defenses. The galaxy watched in shock as humanity, a species they had once considered inconsequential, began to reshape the balance of power. But there was more to humanity's actions than simple retaliation. They didn't just destroy, they sent messages, warnings to those who dared to cross them. The Coalition's members began to see a pattern, a deliberate strategy that hinted at something far more dangerous than brute force. Humanity wasn't just fighting back, they were teaching the galaxy a lesson. And the galaxy, for all its arrogance, began to listen. As the human fleet pushed deeper into Coalition space, the resistance grew. The Coalition's most powerful species, those who had ruled for millennia, rallied their forces. They sent emissaries offering treaties and negotiations. But humanity didn't respond. They didn't need to. Their actions spoke louder than any words ever could. And yet, amidst the chaos, there were questions. Who were these humans? What had driven them to such lengths? The galaxy had underestimated them once, and it had paid the price. But now, as the Coalition scrambled to defend itself, it began to wonder if it truly understood the enemy it faced. Humanity was more than a species. They were a force, one that refused to be ignored. The final message came, a single line transmitted from the flagship of Earth's fleet as it approached the heart of Coalition space. You took from us. Now we take back. The words echoed across the galaxy, a declaration of intent that sent chills through even the most hardened leaders. But what was humanity's endgame? Were they seeking justice or something more? As the fleet advanced, the galaxy held its breath, waiting for the answer. The humans had given their warning. Now, the universe would see if it had heeded it. The stars had always been there, distant and silent, a canvas for dreams and stories that humans once believed they'd never touch. For centuries, they'd gazed upward, wondering if they were alone. The irony wasn't lost on anyone now. They had found the answer to that age-old question, and it had been anything but comforting. The Galactic Coalition, a sprawling union of alien civilizations, had made their presence known long ago. Yet their arrival hadn't been the moment of unity and exploration humanity had once hoped for. It had been a quiet dismissal, a brush-off, and finally, a violation. The Coalition had visited Earth not with promises of friendship, but with thinly veiled disdain. Their advanced technology dwarfed humanity's progress at the time, and their emissaries made no effort to hide their superiority. They weren't conquerors. In the traditional sense, they didn't need to be. The coalition's arrogance lay in their belief that humans were beneath them, an insignificant species barely worth their notice. Their interest in Earth was fleeting, limited to its natural resources. When their surveys marked the planet as not strategically significant, the coalition left, but their disdain lingered. For decades, humanity nursed that wound. Earth had been a scarred and divided planet even before the coalition's arrival. Yet, for all their struggles, humans had never faced an insult as deep as being deemed irrelevant by the galaxy itself. That wound festered, growing into a collective resolve that began reshaping humanity from the inside out. They had no choice but to survive, to adapt. And they did. The coalition never bothered to check back. They had no reason to. Earth's position on the outskirts of galactic trade routes, combined with its initial impression as a primitive and fractured world, made it unimportant. In the absence of outside interference, humanity had room to grow. What the galaxy had failed to understand was that humans thrived under pressure. Every hardship became a stepping stone, every failure a lesson. Within centuries, the planet once mocked as backward had turned into something else entirely. But humanity hadn't forgotten. The coalition's oversight, their dismissal, and later their exploitation of neighboring systems were etched into their collective memory. And when the mining fleets crossed into human-claimed space, violating every warning marker and boundary, it was more than just an invasion. It was the final straw. Few outside the inner circles of Earth's leadership knew what truly happened to those mining fleets. The official records were sealed, even from many of the officers stationed across the growing network of human colonies. The incident was spoken of in whispers, a deliberate mystery that spread through human society like wildfire. What the galaxy saw as an inexplicable disappearance, humans saw as a statement. Earth's defenses were more than capable of handling themselves, but the mystery of how far those capabilities extended kept everyone guessing. Behind the scenes, humanity's preparations were far from haphazard. The Earth Federation, a unified governing body that had risen from centuries of conflict, had one guiding principle: never allow humanity to be vulnerable again. To achieve that, they had invested in science and innovation at an unprecedented scale. The brightest minds worked in secret on projects that seemed impossible to those outside the Federation's inner circles. Artificial intelligence, quantum weaponry, stealth technologies, and propulsion systems that defied the known laws of physics, everything was on the table. While the coalition bickered over trade deals and border disputes, humanity built quietly in the shadows. The starships they designed weren't just tools of war. They were symbols of resilience. Each vessel carried the weight of Earth's history, a testament to what humanity had overcome. And each one was ready to deliver a message to the galaxy. The coalition, for all its size and influence, was fractured. It was a collection of species with their own interests, united more by convenience than loyalty. Their overconfidence had bred complacency, and their advanced technology had become their greatest weakness. For centuries, they had relied on systems that had gone unchanged, assuming their dominance was unshakable. The arrival of the human message shattered that illusion. The words "we are coming for you" weren't just a threat, they were a challenge. The coalition scrambled to respond, but their internal divisions made a coordinated effort nearly impossible. The more powerful species within the coalition argued over how to handle humanity, with some dismissing them as a minor nuisance and others advocating for a preemptive strike. The debates grew heated, and for every day they argued, humanity advanced further into their territory. The humans didn't rush. They moved with deliberate precision, targeting strategic outposts and infrastructure that weakened the coalition without unnecessary collateral damage. Their tactics were surgical, calculated to send a message. They weren't looking to conquer, but to dismantle the systems that had long dismissed them. Each victory was a statement of intent. Each destroyed outpost, a reminder that humanity wasn't playing by the rules of the coalition's fractured politics. As the human fleet carved its way through the galaxy, rumors began to circulate about their leaders. Who were the architects of this unprecedented campaign? Some spoke of shadowy figures with unmatched intellect, the masterminds behind humanity's rise. Others believed it was a collective effort, a species-wide resolve that drove every human to act in unison. The truth was somewhere in between. Earth's leadership was a mix of brilliant strategists, visionaries, and ordinary people who had risen to the occasion. But at its core, the movement wasn't about individuals. It was about humanity as a whole. For the humans on the front lines, the fight wasn't just about survival. It was about proving a point, not just to the galaxy, but to themselves. For too long, they had been the underdogs, the species no one believed in. Now, as their ships pushed further into coalition territory, they carried with them the hopes and dreams of generations who had fought to reach the stars. Yet, for all their resolve, humanity's leaders knew the risks. They were entering uncharted territory, both literally and figuratively. The coalition was vast, and humanity's resources, while formidable, weren't infinite. The longer the campaign dragged on, the more likely it was that the coalition would unify against them. But that was a risk they were willing to take. For them, the message was clear. They would rather face the galaxy head-on than live in fear of its judgment. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the human fleet continued its march. For many, it was the first time they had truly seen humanity. The species that had once been dismissed as insignificant had become a force that couldn't be ignored. And while the coalition scrambled to respond, humanity remained steadfast, their actions speaking louder than any words. The message had been sent, but the question remained, how far was humanity willing to go? For the galaxy, the answer was terrifyingly unclear. For humanity, it didn't matter. They had made their decision long ago, and they weren't turning back. The void of space was silent, but the tension rippled through every human ship like a palpable hum. Humanity had pushed further than anyone could have imagined. The once distant coalition was no longer a series of dots on a map. It was right in front of them, tangible and massive. Their fleets were assembling now, the long-awaited response to humanity's relentless campaign. Warships with armor that shimmered like liquid metal floated in formation, their sheer size casting shadows over the stars. Arrogance had given way to panic, and panic had finally given way to action. In the command center of Earth's flagship, every second felt like an eternity. The officers worked in a tense, synchronized rhythm, their voices calm but firm as they relayed updates and made last-minute calculations. They knew this was what it had all been leading to, the inevitable showdown. But the odds were staggering. The coalition's forces were overwhelming, their technology still a marvel to behold. And yet, the humans were here, standing their ground with a resolve that refused to waver. Out in the darkness, the coalition's admiral transmitted their first and only message. It was a single sentence, delivered in a voice dripping with contempt: turn back or face annihilation. The words lingered in the air, heavy and final, but they didn't have the effect the coalition had hoped for. On board the human ships, no one flinched. If anything, The tension seemed to dissolve, replaced by a quiet, unshakable determination. The humans had not come this far to back down now. The coalition believed their threat would be enough. For centuries, their reputation alone had kept most of the galaxy in line. But they didn't understand what they were up against. Humanity had faced annihilation before many times. In fact, they had survived wars, famines, and disasters that had pushed them to the brink. They had rebuilt from ashes, again and again, driven by something the coalition couldn't comprehend, the stubborn, unrelenting will to endure. The first human ship moved forward, its engines humming with a steady, defiant power. It wasn't the largest vessel in the fleet, but it was the most advanced. Every piece of it had been engineered for this exact moment. The coalition ships responded immediately, their weapons locking onto the lone ship as it approached. To them, it was nothing more than an act of desperation, a doomed attempt to make a statement. They didn't realize it was a test. The human ship didn't fire. It didn't need to. As it neared the coalition's front line, it vanished completely invisible to their sensors, a ghost in the void. A ripple of confusion spread through the coalition ranks, but they didn't have time to react. The ship reappeared behind them, its weapons primed and ready. The first shot was surgical, a pinpoint strike that disabled one of the coalition's largest vessels without destroying it. The second shot came a heartbeat later, knocking out their communications array. In seconds, the coalition's meticulously organized formation was thrown into chaos. That was the signal. The rest of the human fleet surged forward, their movements impossibly precise. They didn't engage in a full-scale assault, not yet. Instead, they used hit-and-run tactics, dismantling the coalition's defenses piece by piece. It was a strategy born of necessity, designed to make the most of humanity's limited resources. But it was also a message. Humanity wasn't here to play by the coalition's rules. For the coalition's forces, it was unlike anything they had ever faced. Their enemies had always fought predictably, relying on brute strength or overwhelming numbers. But the humans fought with a cunning that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. They exploited every weakness, every blind spot, every moment of hesitation. And all the while, they broadcast a single message on every frequency, a reminder of why they were here. We warned you. The coalition's leadership scrambled to respond, their arguments echoing through the halls of their command ships. Some demanded a full-scale counterattack, others called for retreat, and a few whispered about the unthinkable negotiation. But the humans gave them no time to decide. Every moment of indecision was another opportunity, and the humans took full advantage. For every coalition ship that fell, the balance of power shifted just a little more. But humanity's leaders knew they couldn't rely on surprise forever. The coalition was vast, and their resources were nearly infinite. The longer this fight dragged on, the more likely it was that reinforcements would arrive. And humanity couldn't afford to be caught in a prolonged war. They needed to end this quickly, decisively, and on their terms. The flagship's command center buzzed with urgency as the final phase of the plan was set into motion. It was a gamble, a kind of high-stakes risk that only humanity would dare to take. But it was the only way. The humans weren't here to win a war. They were here to make a statement so powerful that the galaxy would never forget. To do that, they needed to strike at the heart of the coalition itself. The human fleet began to shift, their movements deliberate and coordinated. The coalition's forces, still reeling from the initial assault, struggled to adapt. They didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. The humans weren't retreating. They were advancing toward the Coalition's central command ship, the nerve center of their entire operation. It was an audacious move, one that no one had ever dared to attempt. But the humans had made it clear they weren't like anyone else. As the first human ship broke through the Coalition's defensive line, the tension reached its breaking point. The Coalition's forces scrambled to regroup, their weapons firing in every direction as they tried to contain the threat. But the humans pressed on, their ships moving with a precision that defied explanation. Every shot they fired found its mark. Every maneuver brought them closer to their target. The Coalition's command ship loomed ahead, its massive structure a stark contrast to the sleek, agile human vessels. It was a fortress, bristling with weapons and shields that had never been breached. But the humans didn't hesitate. They knew what was at stake, and they knew there was no turning back. As the final human ship prepared to make its move, the galaxy held its breath. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. The human flagship loomed in the shadow of the Coalition's central command ship, its gleaming hull reflecting the faint light of a distant star. The silence in the control room was deafening, as the final assault plans were being executed with precision. Every move had been calculated, every risk accounted for, or so they thought. Just as the first wave of targeted strikes began, an alert echoed through the human fleet. A massive, gravitational anomaly had appeared out of nowhere on the edge of the battlefield. Sensors flared wildly, unable to process the sudden change. It wasn't reinforcements, it was something else entirely. From the void emerged a colossal Coalition dreadnought, a ship unlike anything humanity had encountered before. Its jagged, obsidian-like exterior seemed to devour the light around it, radiating an almost sentient malice. The Coalition's flagship, once a dominating presence, now seemed insignificant in comparison. The humans froze for a moment, and even the Coalition's own forces faltered, as though they hadn't expected this arrival. This wasn't a planned reinforcement. It was an enigma, a wild card thrown into an already chaotic battlefield. The dreadnought wasted no time. Its appearance was followed by a single, devastating strike. A human cruiser vaporized in an instant, its destruction so swift that it left no trace. Panic rippled through the human ranks. The ship's weaponry was on an entirely different level, the kind of firepower that could obliterate fleets with a single volley. This wasn't just a new enemy, it was an existential threat. The Coalition, however, didn't appear to be celebrating its arrival. In fact, their movements became erratic, almost defensive, as though they were as caught off guard as the humans were. The dreadnought opened fire again, but this time it targeted one of the Coalition's own vessels, splitting it apart in a catastrophic explosion. Confusion turned to suspicion. The humans watched as the Coalition's ships broke formation, scrambling to distance themselves from this rogue entity. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. The dreadnought transmitted no messages, no demands, no acknowledgement of its allegiance. It simply continued its rampage, cutting a swath of destruction through both fleets. Its presence introduced a new, unpredictable element into the battle, one that neither side could control. For the humans, it was an opportunity, but it was also a terrifying reminder of how fragile their position truly was. In the flagship's control room, tensions ran high as the human commanders debated their next move. They couldn't ignore the dreadnought's threat, but they couldn't afford to lose sight of their original objective either. Every second spent reacting to this new development brought them closer to being overwhelmed. The Coalition, disoriented and vulnerable, seemed equally paralyzed by indecision. For the first time, humanity wasn't facing a united foe. But that didn't mean they were safe. As the human fleet adjusted its tactics, an encrypted message suddenly came through on their private channels. It was heavily distorted, the voice on the other end barely recognizable. But the content of the message was unmistakable, coordinates and a warning. You don't understand what you've awakened. Finish your mission, or none of us will survive. The message cut out before anyone could respond, leaving the human commanders in stunned silence. Speculation ran rampant. Had the coalition called in reinforcements they couldn't control? Or was this something else entirely? An ancient weapon or rogue faction that had been lying dormant until now? The coordinates provided in the message pointed directly to the coalition's command ship, as if to emphasize the urgency of the humans' mission. But the presence of the dreadnought changed everything. They couldn't simply charge forward, not without risking annihilation. The dreadnought's attacks became more erratic, almost as if it were learning, adapting to the chaos of the battlefield. It wasn't targeting at random. Its strikes were calculated, designed to maximize disruption. It was hunting both fleets, forcing them into an uneasy standoff. For the first time, humanity and the coalition found themselves facing a shared enemy. But cooperation seemed impossible. Decades of enmity couldn't be erased in a single moment of desperation. In the midst of the chaos, the human flagship initiated its boldest maneuver yet. A small contingent of elite pilots broke away from the fleet, their ships outfitted with experimental cloaking technology. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the coalition's command ship and execute a direct strike on its core. It was a desperate gamble, but it was the only way to end the battle before the dreadnought turned its full attention on them. The rest of the fleet would act as a diversion, drawing fire away from the strike team. As the cloaked ships made their approach, the dreadnought suddenly shifted course. Its massive form began to align itself directly with the coalition's command ship. For a brief moment, it became clear the dreadnought wasn't just a rogue element. It had a purpose, one that neither humanity nor the coalition fully understood. But the implications were chilling. If the dreadnought destroyed the coalition's command ship, it would leave a power vacuum that could spiral into chaos. And if humanity's fleet was caught in the crossfire, their hard-fought campaign would end in disaster. The human strike team pressed on, navigating through the debris-filled battlefield with a precision born of necessity. They reached the coalition's command ship just as the dreadnought unleashed another devastating volley. The human fleet scrambled to hold their position, engaging the dreadnought in a desperate bid to buy time. The coalition ships, disorganized and leaderless, faltered under the pressure. But the human commanders knew this wasn't sustainable. Every second they delayed brought them closer to total annihilation. Inside the coalition's command ship, the strike team encountered resistance, but not from the coalition. Automated defenses activated as they breached the hull, targeting anything that moved. It was as though the ship itself had turned against its crew. The strike team fought their way through, their objective clear but their path fraught with danger. The closer they got to the ship's core, the more apparent it became that something was deeply wrong. The ship's systems were failing, its lights flickering as though an unseen force were tearing it apart from within. Back on the battlefield, the dreadnought unleashed a weapon humanity had never seen before. A wave of energy rippled through space, temporarily disabling every ship within its radius. For a terrifying moment, the battlefield fell silent, the once violent exchange of fire reduced to eerie stillness. But the dreadnought didn't seize the opportunity to finish them off. Instead, it seemed to pause, as though it were recalibrating. The moment passed quickly, but it left an impression that no one could ignore. The dreadnought wasn't just a weapon, it was something far more dangerous. And it wasn't finished yet. The human strike team moved through the collapsing corridors of the Coalition command ship, the structure groaning under its own weight. They had finally reached the core chamber, a vast room pulsating with energy, the heart of the Coalition's fleet coordination. But as they prepared to place the charges, something unexpected stopped them in their tracks. The core wasn't just a machine, it was alive. Suspended within a translucent, glowing sphere was an organic entity, a massive, pulsing brain-like structure interwoven with mechanical tendrils. It throbbed rhythmically, as if responding to their presence. The team froze, their weapons raised, unsure of what to do. The creature wasn't attacking, it seemed almost dormant, though its bioluminescent pulses grew brighter as they approached. Suddenly, a voice echoed in their minds, not through their comms but directly into their thoughts. "You think you fight us, humans? You think this war is your victory to claim?" The voice was layered, alien, yet eerily calm. "You are pawns in a game far older than you can comprehend." Before the team could react, the dreadnought's presence became overwhelming. From the viewport above, they saw its massive frame, aligning directly with the Coalition command ship. Its weapons began charging for what could only be a final, catastrophic strike. The team realized that if they didn't act now, they wouldn't get another chance. But something about the creature in the core made them hesitate. Was it a weapon? A prisoner? The voice returned, more urgent now. "Destroy this body, and you doom us all. The dreadnought will not stop. It was designed to end everything." Outside, the battlefield had descended into pure chaos. The human fleet was barely holding its ground, their weapons doing little to deter the dreadnought's advance. Coalition ships, once enemies, were now firing desperately alongside them, their combined forces still unable to halt the behemoth. It was a fight neither side could win, and time was running out. Inside the core chamber, the team leader made the call. Ignoring the voice's pleas, they placed the charges, setting the timer for a detonation that would obliterate the command ship's heart. But just as they activated the countdown, the core entity unleashed a burst of psychic energy, flooding their minds with visions. They saw the history of the Coalition, the rise of their empire, and the creation of the dreadnought not as a weapon of war, but as a failsafe. It had been designed long ago, not by the Coalition, but by an ancient race that predated both humans and the Coalition. Its purpose was to erase any civilization that grew too powerful, a reset button for the galaxy. The team staggered under the weight of this revelation. The dreadnought wasn't rogue, it was fulfilling its purpose. The Coalition's expansion, their domination of other species, had triggered its awakening. But now, with humanity challenging that dominance, the dreadnought had recalibrated its target. It wasn't choosing sides, it was eliminating threats indiscriminately. Both humanity and the Coalition were doomed unless they could find a way to stop it. Timer ticked down, and the team faced an impossible choice. Destroy the core and cripple the Coalition, potentially leaving humanity defenseless against the dreadnought, or gamble that the entity's warnings were genuine. The voice spoke again, quieter this time. "I can help you stop it, but you must let me live. My creators made me to control it, but the Coalition severed my connection. Reunite us, and I will end this." Trusting an alien mind felt like madness, but they had no better options. The leader called for an override on the charges and began working to reconnect the core entity to the dreadnought's systems. Outside, the dreadnought's weapons began to glow with an intensity that promised annihilation. It was seconds away from firing, its target the Coalition's command ship with the human fleet in the line of fire. The connection was re-established just as the dreadnought unleashed its energy. But instead of destruction, the energy dissipated harmlessly into the void. The dreadnought froze, its massive form shuddering as if in pain. On board the command ship, the core entity's glow intensified, its tendrils extending into the ship's systems. For a moment, everything was still. Then, the dreadnought began to retreat, its weapons powering down as it slowly disappeared into the darkness of space. Relief flooded through the human and Coalition fleets, but it was short-lived. The core entity spoke one last time, its voice heavy with something that felt like sorrow. "I have stopped it for now, but this is not the end. The creators designed it to adapt. It will return, and next time, it will not hesitate. Your fates are now intertwined. Work together, or you will both be erased." The connection severed, and the core dimmed, its life force seemingly extinguished. The team stood in silence, the weight of what they had just witnessed settling over them. They had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. The Coalition fleet, crippled and leaderless, began to retreat, their ships vanishing into the void. Humanity, battered but alive, held its position, unsure of what to do next. Back on Earth, news of the battle spread quickly. The dreadnought's retreat was hailed as a triumph, but those who had been there knew better. The war wasn't over, it had only been postponed. For the first time, humanity and the Coalition faced a common enemy, one that neither could defeat alone. The choice was clear, but whether they could set aside their hatred to survive was a question that remained unanswered. As the human fleet regrouped, the flagship's commander looked out at the stars, his thoughts heavy with the knowledge of what lay ahead. Humanity had always been resilient, but this was something new, a challenge that would test not just their strength, but their ability to trust, to cooperate, to evolve. The galaxy was no longer theirs to conquer. It was theirs to share or to lose. And far away, in the silent depths of space, the dreadnought waited, its systems recalibrating, its purpose unchanged. The aftermath of the battle left an eerie silence over the stars. The human fleet, battered and scattered, began to regroup near the remnants of the Coalition's once imposing command ship. The devastation was palpable. Ships hung in the void, some barely operational, others dark and lifeless. Despite their losses, the fact that the dreadnought had retreated felt like a miracle. But miracles often came with a price. On board the flagship, the commander stared out of the observation deck, his thoughts consumed by the alien core's final warning. The truth was unavoidable. This wasn't the end. The dreadnought would return, and next time it would bring a destruction so absolute that no fleet, no strategy, no heroism could stop it. Humanity's survival now hinged on a decision they had never faced before: to trust their sworn enemies or risk extinction. The Coalition's retreat had been as chaotic as the battle itself. Their surviving ships limped away into deep space, their leadership decimated, their chain of command shattered. But even in their desperation, they had left humanity with a parting gift, an encrypted message sent to the flagship moments before their departure. It was unclear whether it was a gesture of goodwill or a last attempt at manipulation, but the contents of that message would determine the course of the galaxy. The commander called for a decryption team, and within hours they had uncovered the truth. The message contained detailed schematics of the dreadnought's design, ancient data logs from its creators, and a map to a hidden facility on the outskirts of the galaxy. The Coalition had known more about the Dreadnought than they had ever let on. They had been studying it for centuries, trying to understand its purpose, to find a way to control it. But their arrogance, their desire to wield its power, had been their undoing. Now, with the Dreadnought reawakening, they had passed the burden on to humanity. The map led to a desolate star system on the edge of the galactic frontier. It was a place no human had ever ventured, a void so remote that it barely registered on their charts. The Coalition's data suggested that the facility housed a failsafe, a final contingency left by the Dreadnought's creators. If it still existed, it might hold the key to stopping the Dreadnought once and for all. But reaching it would require more than just courage. It would require trust. The commander made a bold decision. A message was sent to the Coalition, offering a temporary truce. It was a gamble, one that many in the fleet opposed. After all, the Coalition had been humanity's enemy for generations. But the commander knew that the Dreadnought didn't care about sides. It saw all sentient life as a threat, and it would not discriminate in its mission of annihilation. The Coalition's response came swiftly. They agreed to the truce, but their conditions were clear. They would send a single envoy to join the mission, someone with knowledge of the Dreadnought's origins. Any sign of betrayal, and the truce would be nullified. The human fleet prepared for the journey, their ships repaired as best as possible, their crew ready for what lay ahead. When the Coalition envoy arrived, tensions ran high. The envoy, a tall, imposing figure clad in intricate armor, was met with suspicion and hostility. But they showed no fear, stepping aboard the human flagship with an air of quiet confidence. They introduced themselves as a historian, a keeper of knowledge passed down through generations. They claimed to have studied the Dreadnought's creators extensively and believed that the facility on the map was more. The journey to the desolate star system was long and fraught with challenges. The fleet encountered anomalies, remnants of the Dreadnought's destructive path, and even pockets of Coalition loyalists who refused to acknowledge the truce. But through it all, the humans and their unlikely ally began to find common ground. The historians shared stories of the Coalition's past, their struggles and triumphs, their fears and hopes. For the first time, the humans saw their enemy not as faceless oppressors, but as beings much like themselves. As they approached the hidden facility, the fleet was confronted with a final test. The system was guarded by an automated defense network, ancient but still deadly. The Coalition envoy recognized the technology immediately, guiding the humans through a series of complex maneuvers to deactivate the defenses. It was a moment of trust that could have gone terribly wrong, but it succeeded. The facility, a massive structure carved into an asteroid, loomed before them. Inside, they found remnants of the Creator's civilization, ruins of a once great society that had vanished long before humanity had taken its first steps into space. The historian was visibly shaken, their demeanor shifting from confidence to quiet reverence. The facility's central chamber housed a device unlike anything they had ever seen. It pulsed with energy, its intricate design defying comprehension. The historian identified it as the Creator's final message, a beacon of sorts, designed to send a signal across the galaxy. Activating the device was risky, but the humans and the historian worked together, deciphering its ancient mechanisms. As the beacon powered up, it released a wave of energy that seemed to ripple through time and space. In that moment, they understood its purpose. The beacon was a call, not for help, but for accountability. It was reaching out to the Dreadnought's creators, wherever they might be, demanding that they take responsibility for their creation. The response came faster than anyone could have anticipated. A massive ship, unlike anything they had ever encountered, emerged from hyperspace. It dwarfed even the dreadnought, its design elegant and otherworldly. The creators had returned. The creators' ship sent a single message, not in words, but in pure emotion, a wave of sorrow, regret, and resolve. They acknowledged the harm their creation had caused, the lives it had taken, the civilizations it had erased. They explained that the dreadnought had been their attempt to enforce balance in the galaxy, to prevent anyone's species from dominating. But they had underestimated the consequences of their actions, the unintended suffering they had unleashed. The creators offered a solution. They would deactivate the dreadnought, dismantling its systems and ensuring it could never awaken again. But they also issued a warning. The galaxy was at a crossroads. The destruction of the dreadnought would not solve the underlying tensions between humanity and the coalition. If they could not find a way to coexist, the cycle of conflict would continue, and another catastrophe would be inevitable. The deactivation of the dreadnought was a moment of triumph and reflection. As its massive frame powered down, the galaxy breathed a collective sigh of relief. But the journey back was filled with uncertainty. The humans and the coalition knew that their truce was fragile, their alliance temporary. Yet, for the first time, there was hope that they could learn from their mistakes, that they could build a future not defined by war, but by cooperation. Back on Earth, the commander addressed the people, sharing the story of their journey, their sacrifices, and their discoveries. He spoke not of victory, but of survival, of the need to grow beyond their old ways. The coalition envoy returned to their people with a similar message, planting the seeds of change. The galaxy would never be the same. The dreadnought, once a symbol of fear, had become a catalyst for unity. And while the path ahead was uncertain, it was a path they would walk together. The stars, vast and infinite, held endless possibilities. For the first time in millennia, they felt like they belonged to everyone,